If you've listened to the previous chapters concerning our story, the concept for the business, and the Boulder market, hopefully you have an excellent feel for our business idea and you can tell how excited we are. Now, it will be my job to explain the financial aspects of our business plan and in turn, our investment offering to you. I'll cover the capital that we need in order to successfully open our world-class beer bar for business. In other words, our startup expenses. As an investor, the capital that you contribute to the business will be used to cover things like the cost of renovating the existing building for our needs, purchasing our POS software system, as well as the cash that we believe we should have on hand to cover operations once we open our doors. Based on our thorough research and what we believe is a realistic and accurate estimate, we expect our startup costs to total $562,000. Allow me, in this section, to cover our key startup costs, which you can see here, which total $525,000 or 93% of the capital we need to open our doors. The largest chunk is earmarked for restaurant renovations, $240,000. Restaurant renovations include making the inside and outside appearance of the restaurant suitable for our use as a world-class beer bar. This will include fixing or changing items related to the floor, ceiling, lighting, kitchen, and bar area. As this is such a key piece of our costs, it requires some explanation. $240,000 is an estimate. In reality, we will not know to an exact dollar how much renovations will cost until we select an actual location. Now, you may say, how can you estimate this dollar amount prior to having a location? I spoke to a general contractor that's been in business in Boulder for 19 years. He said that renovation costs could be anywhere from $60 to $100 per square foot, depending on what you want to do. Knocking a wall down will cost more than simply painting the wall, obviously. Based on an average estimate, then, of $80 per square foot, we will use $240,000 as our renovation budget. For example, if our seating area is 3,000 square feet, which is a solid estimate for the size of the establishment we're looking to open, we could therefore afford to renovate all 3,000 square feet. Again, $240,000 is a budget. Once we are interested in a location, we will walk through it with a contractor and explain our requirements. The general contractor will quote us an approximate cost. If that cost is above $240,000, we will not proceed with that location. A key assumption that we have built into our renovation cost budget is that the location that we will select must currently be a restaurant, meaning the space will already have a kitchen. This is very important. As our space will already have a kitchen, we will not be changing how the space is used, and we will not incur costs to add a kitchen to our location, which would definitely be cost prohibitive to us. If we are able to take on a location that requires less than $240,000 in renovations, we will use the additional cash for our operating capital budget. The second key startup expense is outfitting the restaurant. Once we have a space selected and we have a quote from a general contractor to begin work on the space, we need to outfit the restaurant with tables, chairs, bar stools, glassware, salt shakers, and everything else that you see when you walk into your favorite bar or restaurant. Highlights of outfitting the restaurant include tables and booths for about $15,000, the bar itself about $10,000, chairs and bar stools just over $6,100, an oven for $5,000, and all of our glassware for $2,000. The third item is operating capital. We're looking for $75,000 in cash that will allow us to cover fixed costs for 2 to 3 months if business is slow. Indeed, we must still pay the rent and the electricity bill and still pay to have staff at the restaurant even if our business is a little bit slow to begin with. We need to budget for contingencies of that nature. The next item is our food and alcohol inventory. Now that the restaurant is being renovated and we have purchased everything we need to put inside it so that people can sit down, be comfortable, and enjoy their surroundings, we need to be able to serve world-class beer and top-notch food. We must, therefore, purchase our initial inventory of food and alcohol to have before the doors open. We estimate that the total order will be about $64,000. I'll briefly explain how we arrived at this value. For the food component, we expect our food cost in an average month to be about $14,000. We need to keep this $14,000 number in mind when placing in the initial order, but also keep in mind that the very first month will be extremely busy. The last thing we want to do is run out of something on the food menu when we're really attempting to make a strong first impression in the Boulder market. With that in mind, we're planning to order 2 months worth of food, plus an additional $1,000 in food that will be used for the kitchen staff to train on cooking and for the front of house staff to try as part of their training. The total food order is expected to be about $29,000. On the alcohol side, we expect the initial alcohol purchase to be $35,000. This is broken down into 4 pieces. Keg beer, about $13,000, bottled beer, about $10,000, wine, $2,000, and liquor, about $10,000. Of course, once we are selling food and alcohol and generating revenue, we'll order what we need on a weekly or semi-weekly basis. Orders that are placed regularly, once we are in business, will simply be to replenish what we've sold or to accommodate new rotating beers. There are 3 additional items here. I'll begin with talking about the keg cooler. As Michael discussed in great detail in the concept section, we'll serve approximately 80 world-class beers on draft and 100 to 150 world-class beers in bottles. In order to accommodate that selection, we'll need a large cooler for our beer, much larger than a typical walk-in cooler that many bars might have. The owner of the Falling Rock Tap House in Denver, a beer bar with 70 beers on draft, gave us a tour of his keg cooler. It is about the size of a semi-truck trailer, which is roughly just over 400 feet of floor space. Now, we'll build shelves inside the cooler to maximize the use of the space, but it is a large cooler to say the least. Based on our discussion with the owner of a beer bar in Denver and a second opinion from a restaurant consultant Michael spoke to in Boulder, we estimate that it will cost $35,000 to purchase and install the keg cooler. This is an extremely critical piece of infrastructure that we must have in order to achieve what we set out to achieve, serving far and away the best selection of beer in Boulder. Regardless of the existing restaurant space that we take over, it is unlikely that the existing cooler that a restaurant might have would be large enough for our needs, so we must expect to pay to install our cooler. The next item is our Aloha point of sale system. It's the main mission-critical software application that we'll need to use every day. When you see your server or bartender entering your food or drink order at your favorite restaurant, they're likely using a point-of-sale system with touchscreen capability, which allows for quick, error-free data entry. Michael has worked with a number of systems in his time in the restaurant industry, and I've worked with one point-of-sale system. In our opinion, the Aloha program best suits our needs from functionality to scalability. I visited our local Aloha reseller and sat down with him for an hour and explained our business model. He demonstrated the software to me. At the end of the day, he sent me a quote for everything we need for both hardware and software, including the touchscreen terminals, cash drawers, and training for Michael and I, that total quote being $17,000. Finally, the last key component that you can see here is our first rent payment. We will, of course, need to pay rent every month. Rent in downtown Boulder, especially in the Pearl Street Mall area, is not cheap. Based on our research, we expect to pay about $12,000 per month in rent. Rent is negotiable, and so is the amount of rent that you must pay prior to opening. In speaking to an established commercial real estate broker in Boulder, he'll negotiate our rent and what we need to pay prior to opening, if anything. We will do our best to negotiate things such that our first month of rent will not be due until we are actually open, as a landlord will realize that once he has a tenant that has signed a lease, the tenant will not likely be able to pay rent until they themselves have income. With that in mind, though, we do expect to have to pay 1 month of rent, $12,000, prior to opening. As I stated at the beginning of this video, the total key items that you see here account for just over $525,000, or 93% of our total startup expenses, which we expect to be just over $562,000. I'll explain the remaining startup items in the next video.